by Riverside FM.
Welcome to Do Good Work Podcast, hosted by Terrell Strayhorn and Jaquin Johnson. We specialize in taking a deep dive into issues that truly matter. Each episode unpacks the challenges and opportunities facing today's leaders, from classrooms to boardrooms, offering insights that inspire real change. By redefining success, we're changing lives, empowering people everywhere to create environments where everyone feels a sense of belonging, whether at home, work, or school. So hey, sit back, relax, grab your favorite beverage, and join us as we explore the issues shaping our futures, one meaningful conversation at a time. Let's go!
Hello to everyone out there, and welcome to episode 6 of Do Good Work Podcast. I'm Terrell Strayhorn, delighted to be here this evening and joined by my co-host,
Jaquin Johnson. But you forgot already, friend. You also T Rizzy.
T Rizzy.
You T Rizzy, okay? And I'm J Squared. Come on now.
We're in the studio. Excited about this next episode. Thank you for joining us on all platforms right now. We are powering on Riverside and Spotify, but we're also going live on Facebook, on X, and on YouTube. And so it's not too late. Take the link, send it to a friend, send it to a coworker, send it to a student. We're going to be talking about a really important issue in today's episode. And before we go into that, though, we certainly want to invite you to follow us on all things social media at Do Good Work. It's been a productive week, but we're going to get into a couple of those things a bit later. We always like to start off our episodes with a little tradition, and that is to pick one word that starts with the letter of your last name. Now, I'm about to ask Jaquin this question, but you can play along too. Those of you who are listening, think about your last name. What letter does it start with? And then think about one word, not one phrase, not one paragraph, just one word that you would use to describe your week. But it's in your hands, my friend. Jaquin, what is your word for the week?
Yeah, that's right. We want to hear from you. So if you have a word that you're thinking of, put in the chat for us to read it now or later. My last name is Johnson. So the first letter in my name is J. I am feeling like, I'm going to describe it as jamboree. And jamboree means a large celebration, a rally, a gathering, a get together. Listen, it's always a celebration with you. So jamboree is my word for the day. How about you?
Sounds good to me. I'm going to pick, so I thought about this and I forgot the word. Oh, strenuous. Strenuous because this was a week where, it starts off usually on Mondays with some teaching, and that was fun. We got to teach positive psychology 2 sessions during the week, and then we had a mix of, consulting opportunities and visits and travel on campuses. But then as the week ended up, worked with a doctoral student on making sure that she got her prospectus approved.
Listen, let's pause right there, friend. Pause right there. I know, listen, that was amazing. Okay. Yeah. And I hope what I want to share with the people is that there are some people that may not be in your corner, but lean on the ones who are. And although with that student we stayed awake, I know this is your time, but I just got to share it to the people, is that we stayed awake with her, helping her craft her prospectus form, and ultimately it got accepted, right? She started off down and out blue, but through hard work and dedication, she got accepted. So
we should give some claps up for her. Definitely, folks, celebrate. Not just her. There are lots of people probably in the listening audience who have celebrated some things this week. And so, one, don't be afraid to celebrate yourself, celebrate those successes, and shout out to her and every other graduate student, undergraduate student who celebrated a milestone this week. If it was your honors thesis got approved or your master's proposal got approved, or listen, you just finished another course. Sometimes you just got to celebrate the milestones along the way, and our numbers are climbing. So if you are out there, please, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have a reaction, if you have a word that starts with the first letter of your last name, throw it into the chat. You can do it here in Riverside or Spotify, but even on your other platforms, you can do it, and we'll be able to watch it here in the studio. So let's get into some of the things that we want to talk about today. Our episode today, as we put on all of our promo materials, we're going to talk about a really important issue in education, chronic absenteeism. But listen, if you've talked about chronic absenteeism, don't hang up, don't leave, don't go. We probably have not talked about it the way we're going to talk about it today, because chronic absenteeism, everyone's talking about it, Jay, but
we've seen it everywhere.
I'm not sure that we understand how far reaching this issue is. And it's got so many different elements to it. If we're going to think about it in an equitable and justice kind of framework, we're going to do tonight. But I mean, I think about my own self when I was going to school. I mean, one, you couldn't be absent in my house. My mom and dad, who are probably listening, they are not playing. You can just not go to school. Of course, that's not the case with chronic absenteeism. We often talk about it like it's just students who willy-nilly decide, I don't want to go to school, I don't like school, but that's not really what the phenomenon is about. It's about, it's connected to a lot of social issues, a lot of economic issues. There are some identity elements to it. So, I remember going to school. Primarily, people are talking about K-12 when they're talking about chronic absenteeism. But tonight, we're going to protract that a bit to think about what does it mean for even people's post-secondary and college experiences.
Yeah, I think so. But let's paint the picture really quick. Okay, we already introduced chronic absenteeism, but what's the definition of this word? One, you already shared that it is a major problem in the U.S. It's a great concern, but it refers to a student missing 10% or more of instructional days in a school year, including unexcused, excused absences, and out of school suspensions. Not in school, but out of school. So that means like there are 180 days, K-12 instructional days, and students who miss 18 or more days is considered chronically absent. But through our reading and research, right, one thing I've learned is that chronic absences are commonly excused rather than unexcused, which is pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole notion of chronic absenteeism is important, and also that it really has a definition. So, people talk about it like, oh, students are just absent. Well, I mean, yeah, to some extent, that's what we're talking about. But chronic absenteeism, most states, and we were doing some research about this in preparation for the show, many states have policies around chronic absenteeism and typically define it as a student who listen, friends, who misses 10% or more of the school days in an academic year for any reason, as Jaquin just mentioned, excused, unexcused. I want to problematize that language in a moment. Excused, unexcused, as well as out of school suspensions, right? So if you've missed more than 10% of the school year, which for most public school systems, we're talking 180 days. That's a student who misses 18 or more days would be sort of classified as chronically absent. And that's fascinating because one, it didn't seem like that big of a number at first. And if you think about it, split over 2 semesters, most students are going sort of, even during the academic year, you go back to school in August, then you go for winter break and you come back. If you miss 9 days in either one of those semesters, you could hit the metric or the threshold for being chronically absent. Of course, most chronically absent students miss way more than just 18 days. And we're going to talk about it in a moment. Why is this important? What are the consequences for it? What does it mean for teachers? What does it mean for students? But one of the reports we read by Annie E. Casey Foundation, shout out to Annie E. Casey Foundation. They have a blog, came out last year that talks about the fact that most chronic absences are actually excused rather than unexcused. But Jay, I was thinking about this. That's an interesting term, excused, unexcused. And it raised this question for me, like, who does the excusing? And what counts as unexcused?
Excused, yeah.
And who gets to decide? Because again, I think about parents, and it's not just moms and dads, aunties, uncles, guardians. We have studied foster youth, and foster youth who often have who are in foster care, but also have foster families. Maybe we've studied homeless youth who may be with extended family, who are also with fictive kin, people who are not biologically attached to them, right? But if
Right.
I'm staying in the house, if I'm a kid, we're going to come to this in a couple of minutes when we get to this report, but if I'm a kindergartner, and you taught kindergarten, I taught elementary school. If I'm in third grade and I'm living in the house of an adult,
I can't drive. I can't get to school.
I can't go to school.
Yeah.
It's excused. I don't know who. I mean, even if the teacher or the principal or the assistant principal or the superintendent believes that it's unexcused, I think these are those terms that sort of masquerade like they are appropriate and they're objective and they're fair and they're equitable. But as educators and as administrators and leaders, I think we have to unpack this a bit and say, there's a power dynamic there. Some students' reasons for not going to school may not meet our standard for being excused. Oh, but they're excused.
Right. They are excused. I mean, you think about it, like these are students who are not at the age where they can drive or to get to school. They depend on others to get them to school. And, there are some people right now who are probably listening and others who will listen later who will, kind of combat our thoughts and words saying that, there's buses and transportation to help kids get to school. But not every school district has transportation. Right.
Yeah.
So that's something we have to think about. Not every student is privileged to have access to transportation. So, as a student who is in kindergarten, I think we read a report today about kindergarten teachers and chronic absenteeism. We know a 5-year-old cannot drive to school.
That part.
That is, to me, it's excused. Yeah. Mom, dad, aunt, uncle, brother, sister work. I cannot get, what am I going to do?
Well, the other part is, and you named it, if for anyone who's listening and thinking, well, yeah, they have buses and why can't they get there? Let's just unpack that for a moment. Because, one thing I learned, I'm not going to go back here for too long, I promise you. But the election taught me a couple things. And the one thing it taught me is that there are a lot of people who really don't know a lot of things. Like people, can tell us anything because most folks are not 100% knowledgeable about, how a bill gets passed, how a law gets made, the role of Congress, the role of the Electoral College. And so by the same token, there are probably a lot of people who are listening. Good thing I see these numbers rising. Thank y'all. Keep passing the link out and joining us. But, for those who are in education or adjacent to education, you may be more familiar, but the mass of people are not. They're not teachers. They're not principals. They're not superintendents. Here's what you got to know is that not every school district has buses. Type that in the chat if you didn't know. I'm telling you right now that may be new information to people. The other thing is this, that not only, so there are some school districts, yes, in the United States. I'm not talking about a foreign country. I'm talking about in the US where students have to take the public bus system to school. Because there is that little yellow bus, or not the little yellow bus, but the
okay, calm down.
The yellow bus does not go to their school. And two, there are some students rather, who are zoned to a particular school that is way far away from there.
Right, and the bus does not go there.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think that stopped in desegregation when we went to integration, and because back at desegregation. At when schools were segregated, one thing that Black kids often had to do was be bused long distances past schools in order to get to the designated Black school. And I think some people think because of the passage of Brown versus Board of Education and other kinds of things that those days are over with. Well, they're not. I mean, there are a lot of students who, and especially if you live in the South, where schools are still de facto segregated. I mean, it's just because of our tax base and our neighborhoods. But I mean, if you can't afford to live in the neighborhood for a particular school, that school ends up being predominantly a particular race or ethnicity, right? So we want to pay attention to that and think about it, especially as we think about chronic absenteeism, because it is connected to social class, it is connected to identity, and those kinds of matters. The other thing we should know is that it's geographically shaped as a phenomenon. That is, we were reading reports earlier. So some of the lowest rates of chronic absenteeism, Jay was saying, are in places like New Jersey. But there are higher rates in places like, interestingly enough, Louisiana and Hawaii. And I like thinking about like why that might be the case. And, I think it's connected to economics. I think it's certainly connected to social kind of matters. I think there are also differences in sort of the explicit value placed on education, where, people often say, well, students should be serious about their education. I've met a lot of students. I know we have together. And I just haven't met that many students who say, I don't care about my education. I hate school. Now, there are students who hate school, but we'll come to that in a minute, why that happens, right? But I think that generally speaking, students don't hate school. They're made to hate school. And they're sort of made to dislike, disapprove, be disinterested in school, quite honestly, through some of the things that schools do to them. We'll talk about this in a moment, but one of the reports I was reading earlier said, hey, chronic absenteeism is a problem because you got to be present in school if you want to learn. And I thought that's true generally, right? But we all know there are classrooms out there, not yours, any teachers that are listening, but other people's, where students don't learn in that classroom. And if they are learning, they're learning from a teacher who's not using like engaging pedagogies. The classroom's not vibrant. It's not bright. It is boring. And when you go to school and you're disinterested, disinterest turns into disengagement. Disengagement, quite often, I think, turns into absence. A couple thoughts there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's very true. There are many students out there who, I think when you come into school, especially as a kindergartner, I remember being a kindergarten teacher, and they all just love being there, being around their peers, being around the teacher, learning their alphabets, learning how to count, learning how to draw, write, craft sentences. And that's why I really enjoyed being a kindergarten teacher, because it's like it's their first experience of being in school if they didn't go to pre-K. But as the years goes on, as they mature and go to second, third, fourth, fifth grade, you just see that light begin to dim.
Yeah.
Because of their experience in school.
Yep.
And there are some students out there who want to go to school, but because of their situation, they're not able to go to school, right? Because of their situation, we talked about earlier, like transportation. They can't make it, but they're punished. And then we have this award out there. This is what I want to talk to you about, right? We have this award towards the end of the school year that talks about perfect attendance.
Right.
Students who really want to be at school, but unfortunately cannot make it to school due to their circumstances, are automatically, not even in the picture to get that award. Not to mention, they're not even let's remove away from that, being involved in clubs and organizations. Some students who want to be a part of the SGA program, or let alone be the president, but they won't even be viewed as a candidate because they're not at school.
Yeah. I would imagine that, so chronic absenteeism is a problem for lots of different reasons. I think one, of course, is it's hard to be the SGA president when you're missing 20 and 30 days of school. It's really difficult to be actively involved in, a sport. I was in music groups like chorus and, the choir, band. I think all of those become really difficult if you are missing so many days of school. So, there are social implications attached to chronic absenteeism. Here's the other thing. Not only do you fall behind, and then now we're talking about the social attachments or the social friendships that are lost out. Some students come to school. I don't know if people know this. Some students go to school to make friends. Having friends becomes a retention policy. I mean, it becomes students get up in the morning and sometimes it turns out they're not thrilled about getting to school and learning math or learning history or learning science, although there are some. Many times it's just about getting there and hanging out with my friends. But what if you don't have friends? Or what if you have been left out of those groups? Or you don't have a meaningful attachment to a teacher, which is why, we often talk with administrators about making sure that they don't burden teachers with so much administrative work, which we'll come to, I know, later, but they don't overburden teachers with administrative work and reporting, because actually part of the work for teachers is getting to know their students. Listen, pause. I hope y'all like our new intro. We
it's good, right?
I don't even know the pro's name, but shout out
it took a lot of work right there, because listen, the pro called me Jaquan, Jaween before we got it to Jaquan, but it's
that's
okay.
My point is that administrators should give teachers time to get to know their students, get to know what their name is, how to pronunciate and enunciate it. Know something about their aspirations, their future. What are you trying to do? What are your interests? So that they can then use that to support the student in the classroom. I can be the only witness to those of you listening in the audience that when we were working, I can't remember what day it was, and when we got the first draft of the intro from the pro, he mispronounced Jaquan's name, and he went from like this person where the sun was shining, the birds were chirping, to
I was different. Listen,
Amy Winehouse would say "back to black." He was just like, "Down,
back to black," and black. I'm blackity black, but black, friend, because I asked myself, it's so important.
Yeah, it can really zap you.
You can come into the school and be happy to be there, happy to be around your friends, happy to, see your teacher and learn something new. But if you call me the wrong name, listen, my mood completely changes. Yeah. Especially when you're in a school. Let's say there's 180 days, and we are at the 100-day mark, and I see you every single day. You mispronounce my name. That's a problem. That's an issue. And to some people, actually, let me stop playing around. I'm trying to be political. There are many people that we have been around and met that feel disrespected by that, and feel that the person doesn't care about them, doesn't see them, doesn't value who they are, or perceive them as a person who is important enough to learn their name.
Yeah.
You see me every single day.
Yeah, I think that's the consequence. That's the problem with it, is that it's not just the mere mention of a person's name or mistaking them for someone else or forgetting that they're actually not from the city, state, or country that you assign to them. It's the meaning that they make of it is, man, you don't even know me. You don't care about me. You don't care enough to even try. And usually, if people don't care how much you know, to all of the educators that we work with, until they know how much you care, right? So this is about student success. It is about student achievement. It is about this. And the other part of it is, we already know from, we were looking at those reports earlier, that there are certain students who are placed at risk for chronic absenteeism. One, students with disabilities, students living in poverty, students from urban sort of communities and neighborhoods who might have less resources. Then add on top of that, that these students are already coming into the school or the university with fewer resources meaning not just dollars and cents, although that's important, but also fewer resources. And they don't have private tutors. They don't have resources to study abroad and to, necessarily computers in the home and all of the things that some students with affluence have, right? And then you add to that, that they're feeling socially detached or even disrespected. Chronic absenteeism is a natural sort of consequence of that. And we've seen these upticks in chronic absenteeism in many, many, many states since the pandemic. I know people are probably saying, okay, so 10 or more days or 10% more days or whatever. But let me tell you this last statistic. The most recent report from the National Center for Education Statistics estimated that about 11 million students in the United States are chronically absent. That's a lot of students. That is a lot of students. I mean, 11 million. So we got to do something, about this challenge, because now let's talk for a moment about why people are absent. I think one that I like to just put on the table, Jay, is one, we write about this quite a bit, but students are absent because, and I want to talk about this one, but health and mental health issues. Now, listen, y'all have the chat available. Feel free to use it. Put a comment on social media, whatever you like to say. I'm just going to stand by my word on this, and that is, if you are sick, especially if it's contagious, you have my permission to stay home.
Keep your butt at home. Stay home.
Tell your teacher it's excused, and then pull this
It's
podcast
excused.
up and tell them
Immediately.
Quinn, excuse me.
Signed off today. Listen, you are touching doorknobs. You are in the gym before school starts. You are, on the bus. Stay home.
Please.
You are truly impacting other students.
Yeah. I think, I get it. But this is the problem with the award you were talking about earlier is, to all the principals, superintendents, and folks out there who hand out these awards, let's unpack this award about perfect attendance. First of all, that's unrealistic. No one's life. It's so
no one is ever perfect.
People who award perfect attendance to students don't have perfect attendance to work. No one's life is perfect. I don't know that the goal should be perfection. I think that's problematic because it sets up this standard that, oh my gosh, I'm broken if I have to miss a day or even 2 days. But if you have the flu, if you have a cold, if you have a doctor's appointment, or you need to, things come up, it's okay to stay home. Everybody needs a mental health wellness day. So I think that we have to normalize and affirm these practices that are very humanizing. It's human to need a day. You shouldn't be punished and therefore lose access to the award. Maybe it's like good attendance, or some attendance award that goes to students who attend 90% of the time or something like that.
You mentioned that it's human to lose a day. We taught a class.
Popcorn over there?
Boy, it's Ice Machine just being loud and reckless for no reason.
I thought you were popping popcorn for our audience. Listen, somebody go pop some popcorn. What were you going to say?
So you mentioned that humans tend to lose a day or a couple of days. Yeah. They need a mental break. They are sick and etc. Everything like that. We were teaching a positive psychology class, and we asked students, like, what are your needs? What are your needs? Type them in the chat. Friend. Let's be honest. All of them literally in some form or fashion said that they need a mental health day. They need a day that they can just not worry about school, not worry about their mom, not worry about other people.
No, that's
but
true.
You just be in solitude and think about themselves. Maybe take a nap, read a book. One of the students said they love quilting, right?
Yeah.
They need a day. Now, I say that, I want to also say, you got something to say?
Well, I was just going to say, let's just affirm that. Everybody needs a day. If you have not already, planned to take a day. Otherwise, we were talking to the students, and we asked them, like, what would it take for them to get what they need, which is a day? And so many times we deny ourselves as human the thing that we need when it can be so easy to do. If you need a dessert, give yourself a dessert. I'm not trying to tell you to break your diet. I'm not trying to tell you, listen, you know what you're supposed to do. If you're medical, you got issues, you got to follow the doctor's orders. But by the same token, I've met people who say, I just need to take a day off. Or I need half a day off, or I just need to go for a walk, or I need to do some stretches. And they don't do it. I need to peel some potatoes or bake a cake, a way to just unwind. The world is in and under a lot of pressure right now for all sorts of reasons. And I think mental health is an epidemic. It's a serious matter. And for us to be asking college students, what's the one thing we need? We thought they might say, I need more money. I need a study buddy. I need they said a break.
A
So
break.
what we're trying to do right now is figure out when we can give them a break. When we gave them a break, actually, we gave them a
We're
day.
gonna try. We did give them a day. We did give them a day, and that is humanizing their experience
Yeah,
because it's needed.
yeah,
And hopefully, let me tell y'all something, because I know they are on this podcast as well, because we shared it with them and they all said that they're going to come. And I know that they're here because they are students who are always dedicated to supporting us. We support them. Now, listen, y'all, on Monday, y'all going to come to class talking, okay, about the discussion that we read last week.
we gave them a day last week, not this week.
So let's talk about this really quick. The impact of being absent from school, like the impact on the student. So we already know through research and common knowledge that students who miss most days or 18 or more days are at risk of having lower grades.
Yeah.
Right. They are less likely to be involved in clubs and organizations. They are less likely to progress academically. But let's also say something as well. This impacts, especially for your high school students, impacts their college application.
Yeah, I mean,
when students, go ahead.
No,
I'm gonna give you the floor. I'm gonna give you the floor. I'm gonna give you the
floor.
floor. Give you the floor.
I'm just thinking, like, people often talk about chronic absenteeism as a K-12 problem, but one, I'm thinking if you have a lot of days absent, I mean, I would hope, just because I want to believe in the power of teaching and learning and all of that, there is a consequence for missing school. And it should show up in one's academic achievement, academic performance, in their grades. We were talking earlier and brainstorming about tonight's episode. Think about this. There are kids who are out there, they miss the day that, you take a standardized test. If you don't take the standardized achievement test and so forth, it has impact on your ability to progress to the next level. And so, to the admissions counselors who will read your transcript, you can see this. There's a penalty for those kinds of outcomes. And so I think that's one. I think two, that, a lot of times when admission counselors are looking at people's transcripts, or let's just say their entire holistic kind of review, you're also looking for not just grades, but you're looking for, well, it depends on who's reading it, but hopefully some sort of deep, sustained, meaningful engagement or involvement in clubs and activities. Well, it's hard to be involved in clubs and activities when you're chronically absent, especially in a school context. So then you sort of lose out there. And I'm thinking that, chronic absenteeism certainly has an impact on one's college options. It doesn't mean you can't go to college. It just means that it may influence the kinds of colleges that are available to you.
Yeah, I want to pause for a moment, friends. Let's slow down a little bit, okay? Because I didn't start. Listen, okay. Now I'm talking, giving y'all insight of my life. I did not start driving. I don't even think I got my permit until I was 21. Right? I depended on my parents. It's kind of embarrassing. I depended on my parents to get me to school when I was a senior in high school. And what we just said is that there are students who miss school 18 or more days, and it significantly impacts their grades. And we know there are some schools, if you don't have a 2.0, depending on where you go, okay, 2.0 or higher, you won't get accepted. But enrollment counselors do not look at absences, which probably plays a role in their GPA. That is a case to as an enrollment counselor. I was a former enrollment counselor, right? If I saw that, listen, listen, if you know better, you do better. I didn't know better then. I wouldn't have paid attention to the absences because that's not part of our requirements. It wasn't how we were trained. But now I think I would have to make a case for students. Mm-hmm. I want us to talk about that a little bit in terms of, how absences impact students' grades, and based on their GPA, if it's, let's say, a 2.5 or below, impacts the school that they can get into in college.
Yeah. I mean, I think, so again, if we believe in the power of teaching and learning, something is happening in the classroom that a student misses out on if they are chronically absent, right? So, here's a good example. Okay, listen to all of the students who are listening. Now, listen, we just gave you the podcast. We didn't say you had to come, but if you are here, this is a safe space. So, we gave this exam, and there are 6 principles.
Oh, child.
Resilience.
Okay, that's where you want to go today. Calm
there are
down.
6 principles of resilience. I'm not going to tell y'all what it is.
And they tried it. Go
ahead. And we gave it to them. And, straight from the textbook. Well, we give the exam, and 50% of the students have this 6th element that does not match anything that we taught. And we were actually in Australia when we were grading the exam. And I thought, wait a minute.
Okay, so
hold on a second. So listen, friends, I went to ChatGPT. We got no problem with chat. You can listen to the chat too. But went to ChatGPT, put the question in there, hit enter. There it was. Every single one of them.
Every single
that
one
we could hear was there. And what do you say? So we learned that our students use ChatGPT on the exam. Now, granted, they didn't violate necessarily any academic policies because it was an open book exam and so forth. We went back to the class, told them, listen, stop using ChatGPT. Chat is not in the class that you're enrolled in.
And
Chat
read the darn book.
Answer. And they said, well,
read the darn book.
Yeah, how did you know? Well, we knew because half of y'all had the same wrong answer. I'm thinking, this is why you got to come to class. Attendance in class is important. And it's partly important because sometimes instructors like us, base the examination on what's covered in class, not what you can find just anywhere. That's all I would. I think that's another. So that's going to, I was real optimistic. I wanted the average for that exam in our class to be something like 90, 100. It ended up being more like, I don't know, 79 or 80. And you think about this at the student level, if that's the average and it impacts your grades, well, when you go to college, your GPA is impacted by that.
Well, let's talk about it though as well. I mean, you make a really good point, but we also have to think about, friend, some of those students in our class are working during class time because they have to make ends meet. They have to support their family, pay their bills. And listen, if you're working and trying to listen to the class, you're probably not at 100%, or listening to every word that we're sharing. So these are some of the things we must consider about some of our students who are attending class, but also have to work, right?
Yeah.
The next thing I want to talk about too is like the teacher impact. What's the impact on the teacher?
Oh yeah, we read a paper about this. Let's talk.
Yeah, so we read a paper, and it was interesting. It was looking at kindergarten teachers and their job satisfaction based on students' absenteeism, and it shared that, or the findings revealed, chronic absenteeism impacts teachers' job satisfaction. Mm-hmm. So students who, teachers don't show up to teach to no one. I remember I remember being in a class in undergrad. I was a interdisciplinary studies major. And one of my teachers asked the class, why do you want to be a teacher? And in some shape or form, every student in that class mentioned that they want to be a teacher because of the students. They want to make an impact. No teacher goes to school to teach to an empty class. Yeah. Not even in higher education, right? Yeah. There's no reason, no point to lecture if no one's in the classroom. Students matter to us. And it impacts job satisfaction when they're not there. Now, okay, we made that statement. But in the definition, this is what we want to talk about, right? In the definition, it says that a student missing 10% or more days of instructional, or 10% or more of instructional days in a school year, including unexcused and excused absences, and hear me right here, out of school suspensions.
Yeah.
Teachers play a role in out of school suspensions. Students of color, specifically Black males, are more likely to be suspended from school. So, teachers, you play a role in the issue that we're faced today, especially for Black men, Black boys, right?
Yeah. We've had dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and years of research that show that Black and brown boys are disproportionately represented among those who are, let's unpack it, who are sent to detention, who are placed in suspension, both in school and out of school. And the other interesting and unfair, inequitable thing about that is they are usually sent to detention and suspension for some of the very same things that other students do, same behaviors, but the consequences are far greater for them. That, there's a whole literature on the adultification of African-American students, Black students, both women and men, boys and girls. But also, you think about it, if Johnny talks out of turn, well, that's maybe is not the best name to use, but I'll stick with my example. If Johnny talks out of turn, the teacher says, oh, Johnny, we use our hand in the class. But if Tyrone talks out of turn, then it's Tyrone, you're shouting me down. You're being disrespectful. You're breaking the rules. You're acting like a whatever, fill in the blank, hoodlum, thug.
Oh.
Before you know it, you send them to the office. Seriously, and the problem with this is these automatic associations, what we call implicit bias, they're automatic. That unless you are intentional, you could be a well-intended teacher, but fall prey to these automatic associations that are fed to us by the media, that are fed to us by politics and politicians. Before you know it, you're demonizing little kids, in ways that are just inequitable, unfair, but set them up to be out of school more than their peers who are in school. So now you as a teacher are part of the problem. You are creating the conditions that will lead to them not having the same learning opportunities as their peers. So when if they don't finish high school, we shouldn't say, oh, shame on them, shame on their parents. We have to admit the school's policies, the punishing practices, the discipline procedures played a role in shaping those outcomes. Now, we know that's a lot to swallow at once. Nobody wants to admit that. People it's much more comfortable to blame it on the kid and the family and the community. But we have to accept our responsibility in it. There's an accountability system in place that says, hey, look, if I'm aware of it, then I need to pay attention to it. So if we're going to fix the problem, we don't just fix the student or try to fix the parent. We also have to pay attention to the policies and practices within the school and the classroom that play a role in shaping this. One other thought that came to my mind is you said something about teachers do like students coming to school. Real quick story. I know our audience says to us all the time they like stories. So it doesn't just happen in K-12, it happens in higher ed. And it is part of the formula for student success. And we would even argue it's part of the formula for a sense of belonging. So Jay, I'm talking about the story of a professor in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I meet a student who's about to knock me over, running to class while I'm on my way to give a lecture. And the student says, I'm on my way to my favorite class. I'm like, what's your favorite class? He said his favorite class is organic chemistry. No shade to all of the chemists out there. That is usually not what students say. So I'm curious why organic chemistry becomes the student's favorite subject. And the student says it without hesitation. It's the instructor. It is my teacher. So the question is, okay, so what about the teacher makes it your favorite class? He says, my teacher loves me. I said, how do you know your teacher loves you? Does the teacher tell you, hey, class, I love you? The student says, that would be creepy. No, my teacher shows me that they love me. And how does the teacher show me that they love me? Listen, for anyone who's think about this, one, he says, my teacher's there in the classroom. 2, he shows up on time. 3, after class, he's not rushing to leave. He hangs out and makes himself available to us. 4, while in class on the very first day when everyone's going over the syllabus and most teachers, instructors are saying, listen, here are the rules. You better get this done. Here are the deadlines. I don't accept late work. This instructor takes a different tact and says, listen, this is the plan for the class, and reviews the 15 weeks, but says at the end, that's my plan for the class. That's my plan before I met you. You're the real guest of honor, and I cannot do this without you. No matter what graduate training I've had, this class is not possible without you being here every day. That I come to this classroom not to teach, I come to this classroom to meet you, connect with you. And that's the kind of humanizing and personalizing pedagogy that really will call students to come to class. It'll also boost belonging and success.
Cheers, cheers, cheers. Bravo. You made several really good points, right? You talked about students who rush to class, or teachers who rush to class, teachers who rush out of class, teachers who just lay down the law saying, I don't accept late work, not considering students' life outside of the classroom. These are all pedagogies that we must consider to let students know that, listen, I know that this course is not your entire life. Mm-hmm. Some of you live on campus. Some of you live off campus. Some of you have a good home life. Some of you have a bad home life. Some of you work. Some of you don't work. Some of you have dependents. Some of you don't have dependents. Some of you take care of, the list goes on and on, mm-hmm. right? And I think that the teacher did a really good job of letting the students know, listen, although I created this plan without even knowing you, I had you in mind. But now that we're here in this room together, and as we learn and grow together, and I learn you, you learn me, this syllabus may change based on how the course evolves. Now, there may be some courses or some assignments that, that's on the syllabus right now. It may change because I'm learning you, you're learning me. All teachers don't do that, which is why the student shared with you, listen, I am what was the student? They were like a music major. They weren't a music major, but I'm running to chemistry. Let me tell you something. I never ran to chemistry. Listen, I went to chemistry class at the very last minute. Right? Yeah. But if I knew that my teacher wanted me to be successful, knowing that I'm not a chemistry major, I'm probably going to show up on time, if not 10, 20 minutes early, just to see them, just to talk to them, and ready to learn, which plays a vital role in students' participation, engagement, grades, and the level of effort they put into their assignments.
Yeah. I mean, the study that we read about teacher job satisfaction is an interesting one. It was a study in Educational Researcher. If you all haven't, read it, then follow us at Do Good Work on social media. We'll post it sometime this week. But it's one of those situations where it's really the case that teachers derive satisfaction from their job, not just by going to the classroom, not just by eating apples, that metaphor that, sort of stereotype about the teacher, but many times they're motivated to do this work to connect with students. That's not just in K-12, that's in higher ed. And I know that there are lots of educators who will likely listen, to us. And so, we're wrapping up, coming up at the top of our time. I'd say this, special shout out to all of the educators who are in this work because you care about students. in this work and doing this work because you really do want to do good and no harm. What we'd say is, as we think about this chronic absenteeism problem, our solution to the chronic absenteeism probably is not going to be procedural, in my opinion. It's probably not going to be a policy change. I mean, we were looking through some of the things that students or schools do. One way that they sort of address this problem is by establishing policies that then govern attendance taking. That's important. That they also, invest dollars into technology and software systems and data systems so they can track attendance better. That's helpful. But probably not the only, right? Here's what I would offer, and Jay, I would love for you to, share your thoughts about what is it that educators can truly do to address this issue. But I'm going to go consistent with the work on belonging. I think one of the most powerful pools we have I was looking at a report earlier called attendance recovery. If we're trying to get them back into the school, back into the classroom, I think it's going to be through the personal connection. We're going to have to create schedules for the school day that allow space, sanctioned space, for students to get to connect with one another and to make friendship groups or become friends, that they get to know their teacher, they get to have fun. When I was in Hawaii giving a talk at the Hawaii Department of Education, I heard from principals who said things like, they're reimagining the lunch hour, where lunch is not just lunch anymore, but there's karaoke, basketball, that you take part of the lunch period. Of course, you got to eat. But then the other part for students who are doing well in class, who are abiding by the rules, who are tracking well, that they are also rewarded with discretionary time. They get to go outside. They get to engage in yoga, all sorts of things that are healthy for health and well-being. I think those kind of activities and strategies can really help us make school exciting and, compel students to come back. Listen, I don't want it to be the case that you think, chronic absenteeism is just about students who want to leave and not be there. We mentioned earlier, we do have to double down our investment in making sure that students have transportation, reliable transportation to school. Here's the other thing. Just because you can get to school doesn't mean your commute is safe. Sometimes we must have policies and procedures in place that protect students from bullying and from harassment. That's another reason why a lot of students, I'm not talking about all students, there are students who are low income, no income, tall students, full size, fun size, LGBTQI2A+. We must protect our students and make sure that they can get from home to school and back again safely. Those things do matter. And then also that they can, if they need to, that they get the support that they need. A lot of our work that we're looking at students with disabilities is helping us think about the power of music therapy in schools and other kinds of non-therapeutic supports. I think those also make a difference.
That's really good. So you talked about the student side. I want to talk about the parent side. Mm-hmm. We have to meet students where they are, but we also have to meet parents where they are and cultivate positive relationships with our parents. And the way to do that is building trust with them. One, we have to declare our intentions, letting them know what we envision for their student, what we plan to do in the classroom. Not only the what, but the why. Why we take time to learn reading, math. Why we design our classroom the way it's designed or laid out. Why we do X, Y, and Z. And then signal our behaviors. Hey, if your student does a good job, what is your preferred way for me to respond to you or for me to engage with you? Is it text? Is it email? Is it phone call? Yeah. Let me do those things. Tailor it to the parent. Signal to them what you're going to do. And then honor your commitments. If you say you're going to do something, then do it. I think if we can get the parents involved in the student's education and build trust with the parent, there is a way to help students come to school more, right? There are parents that are out there who will never talk to who would never talk to the student's teacher because they have no relationship with them. And if you don't know, you don't know. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to say. But if you have a relationship with the parent and they communicate with you on a regular basis, you can be proactive in helping your student find a way to get to school.
Well, I'm thinking about the principles you just laid out of trust. This comes from lots of different sources, but Stephen Covey and others have written about trust. And Wayne Hoy, Dr. Wayne Hoy, professor emeritus at the Ohio State University, one of my former colleagues, he used to write about trust in schools. I'm thinking if teachers, educators, administrators want to build trust with parents, how do you do it? Let's just take your principles and apply it to them. You were talking about, one, that parents, guardians, community members, mentors, pastors have to know what are your sort of intentions with their student. I think I remember, listen, I didn't know much about teaching when I first got into the K-12 classroom. This was right after I got out of like undergrad and I was teaching. I didn't come through a teacher prep program. It's okay. It is appropriate for you to say like, look, listen, and they call me Mr. T in my classroom or in my school. In Mr. T's classroom, and we've said this in a number of different settings, this is a place where you can be yourself. I intend to create a space in my classroom where your son, your daughter, your student can explore, can imagine, can dream, can expect to be treated with dignity and respect and not mishandled. That's my intention. I think we've got to develop a vocabulary as teachers and as educators where we let parents know that, because listen, especially in today's time, most parents are concerned about their students' well-being and their safety at school, though they should not have to worry about those things. But, we've seen more mass shootings in schools than ever before. And, your classroom should be that sanctioned space where, and this doesn't have to be K-12, it can happen in higher ed, it can happen in the cultural center, it can happen in the academic advising center, it can happen even in athletics, that this is a place where you can be yourself. That's the intention. Secondly, that here's what I'm going to do to make sure that that's the case. I'm going to get to know your student. I'm going to learn their name. I'm going to, every now and again, I don't know if y'all know about the magic stick. You may have to use the magic stick where you don't get to talk unless you're holding the magic stick. So I'm going to create practices in my classroom where your son or daughter, here's the part that's equitable, regardless of their neurodiversity, regardless of their speed of speech or how fast they process information. This is a classroom where they do not have to be embarrassed about that, because we're going to have very transparent ground rules or community guidelines that allow everyone to participate in equitable ways. You can tell parents, this can come through a newsletter. It can come through an email. It can come during parent-teacher conference nights. It can, lots of different ways it can be communicated. And then the most important thing is you got to deliver on that. The reason why a lot of parents, I think, have lost trust in schools and in teachers, to some extent, not you, those who are listening, but to others, though, there are some teachers out there who have made some promises and not delivered, said things like, my classroom is a space where your student can be treated responsibly and fair and equitably, and then they mishandle them. And I'll say it for myself, listen, I tell people all the time, I went to great schools growing up, but I know for a fact, I have it to this day, my 12th grade math teacher, whose name will go unmentioned and unnoted, wrote on one of my tests that I made a dumb move. And I had made a mistake, but teachers, you don't write dumb on a student's paper. I was a high performing student, but to have a teacher who I already knew was sort of leaning towards just not supporting people like me, had nothing to do with me personally, but I was a little too young to understand that, put this on my paper. Always gave me a hard time in that class, was surprised when I did well, but was pleased when I struggled. That should not be the case. And that when that happens to the student, you lose interest, you lose trust. When I go home and tell my mom and dad about that, well, in my family, my mom and dad are going to show up at your school the next day. But, a lot of times it means that the adult will also start to lose trust in the school. And then, of course, chronic absenteeism is to follow.
Yeah. Chronic absenteeism is a major problem in the U.S. Students are missing 18 or more days during the school year, and it is impacting their grades, their progress to degree completion, their involvement, and ultimately, students who want to go to college is impacting their chances to enroll into higher education. So I think that, the things that we talked about today reveals the major issue that we're facing in America. And we also shared a couple points basically around building relationships, not only with students, but with parents to help overcome this challenge of chronic absenteeism. So I hope today that you all the people who tuned in, the people who will listen later, learn something today and will do something about chronic absenteeism. You have any final remarks?
I mean, all is not lost, of course. If you're concerned about chronic absenteeism, there's an enormous amount of research out there. Again, follow us on Do Good Work. I don't know if you've been keeping up with all the folks who are leaving one of these platforms that'll go unnamed, but if you are not on that platform anymore, you're leaving that platform, connect with us on LinkedIn, connect with us on Facebook, connect with us on Instagram. Before we go, we have certainly had a full conversation. We want to say some special shout outs. Listen, as I said, I think the way to sort of win the battle against chronic absenteeism is not just procedural and policy. I think it is through the connections that we build. And that takes us back to our belonging work. And belonging does matter. Special shout out to an individual who's conducted some research on belonging, the newly minted Dr. Ricky Frazier. Can we just clap for Dr. Frazier?
Clap it up, clap it up.
There are people in here who are getting doctorates out in these streets. But we certainly celebrate Dr. Frazier. His dissertation is titled Navigating the Black First Year Experience, Exploring Ways Peer Mentoring Can Enhance Engagement and Belonging at a Predominantly White Institution. You'll see it on our social media through a shout out post as well. But to all of those who are conducting research on issues of student success, FYE, sense of belonging, keep up the good work. Know this, that we started the episode saying that someone passed their prospectus. We're closing saying that someone earned their doctorate. And so just know this, it is possible. Stick with it, stay with it. Speaking of, stick with and stay with us. We will look forward to joining you next Saturday for another live episode of the Do Good Work podcast. Without further ado, this has been real great. Always good to connect with you, my friend. And brother, I appreciate every single person who's listened in. Remember, we put our posts out on social media. You join us here on any platform. Please share the episode with others. If you're a teacher, talk to your district, talk to your superintendents, talk to your principals, share the episode with them. And then certainly if you have questions or things you want us to address, check us out here. Last word, brother?
Nothing more. You said it all. Appreciate you all so much for... Oh, I do got something. I just appreciate you. I appreciate everyone who tuned in. Numbers are still climbing. It's been a blessing. And I appreciate the conversation that we had together about chronic absenteeism. Next week, again, we'll be right here talking about a new topic.
Thank you for tuning in to Do Good Work Podcast. We hope you found today's conversation informative, uplifting, and insightful. Don't forget to like and share this episode with your networks. Follow us on social media at Do Good Work on X, formerly Twitter, for real-time updates, behind-the-scenes content, and so much more. Until next time, friends, don't be afraid to do something, but do something good. Do good work.